As Jessica made her way through the shared apartment she had come to call a home, her fingers grazed the wooden surface of the bedroom table, stopping abruptly as they encountered an unexpected envelope. A deep sense of curiosity mixed with unease washed over her as she recognized Alex's handwriting on the front. Her heart pounded in her chest, a premonition of dread settling in as she slid her finger under the sealed flap and pulled out the letter nestled within. The room felt unnaturally silent as she unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words that would unravel her world. "Dear Sarah," it began. "I've spent nights wrestling with this decision, torn between my past with you and my present. I realize now where my heart truly lies." With each word, Jessica's vision blurred, the letters jumbling together as tears welled up in her eyes. The man she loved, the man she planned to marry, still harbored feelings for another. A ghost from his past he couldn't seem to leave behind. Confronting Alex became inevitable. She waited in the living room, the letter clutched in her trembling hands, as he returned home. The door creaked open and there he stood, his face a mask of exhaustion, unaware of the storm about to break. Jessica's voice, though quivering, carried a sharp edge as she held up the letter. "What is this, Alex? Why is her name written on every part of this paper that was supposed to be about us?" Alex's face drained of color as his eyes landed on the letter. For a moment he said nothing, his silence more telling than any words could be. Finally he sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "Jessica, I never meant for you to find that. I wrote it in a moment of confusion." His admission was a cold blade through her heart. "Confusion about us?" she pressed, her voice rising with emotion. "Or confusion about why you couldn't let her go even when you promised yourself to me?" The ensuing conversation was a painful blur. Alex confessed that his feelings for Sarah had never fully extinguished. They had merely simmered beneath the surface, rekindled by a recent unexpected reunion. Jessica listened, each word slicing deeper into her already fragile spirit. Here was the man she had built her dreams around, telling her that those dreams were built on the shifting sands of his unresolved past. As Alex packed his bags, the finality of the moment settled around Jessica like a shroud. He was choosing his past over their future, leaving her to pick up the pieces of a life she thought they were building together. With a defeated slouch, he carried his suitcase to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "I'm truly sorry, Jessica. I never wanted to hurt you." But the apology, meant to soothe, only fueled her despair. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Jessica enveloped in the silence of the now empty apartment. She sank to the floor, her body racked with sobs that echoed off the walls, a mournful symphony to her shattered heart. In this sanctuary of their shared memories, every picture, every piece of furniture, screamed of Alex's betrayal. How could she have been so blind? How did she not see the signs? Days turned into weeks, and Jessica's initial despair gradually morphed into a smoldering anger. She resolved to purge her life of everything that reminded her of Alex. She donated clothes, redecorated the apartment, and threw herself into her work with a fervor born of a need to prove to herself, and perhaps to Alex, that she could thrive without him. She rose through the ranks at her job, her successes a balm to her wounded pride. Yet the universe wasn't done testing her. On a rainy evening, as she drove home from a particularly grueling day at work, her thoughts clouded with career plans and the remnants of her broken heart, disaster struck. Another vehicle, its lights blurred by the downpour, veered into her lane. The world spun wildly, a terrifying screech of metal on metal overwhelming her senses before darkness claimed her. When Jessica next opened her eyes, the sterile white of a hospital room greeted her. Her body ached, bandages wrapped tightly around her torso, but it was the emptiness in her mind that frightened her the most. She recognized the concerned faces of her family and friends gathered around her bed, but when they mentioned Alex, no flicker of recognition sparked within her. The doctors were gentle in their explanation. The accident had caused a significant head injury, leading to retrograde amnesia. "It's selective," one doctor explained. "You remember most things, but specific recent memories might be inaccessible." And just like that, Alex, the cause of so much of her recent pain, was erased from her memory. But memory or no memory, life had to go on. Jessica learned to navigate a world where whispers of her past self echoed through the actions and reactions of those around her. She rebuilt herself, not as the woman who had been left for a childhood love, but as someone new, someone forged through the fire of her trials. Months passed and Jessica's life settled into a new rhythm, one of success and newfound independence. She discovered a passion for painting, her canvases filled with the vibrant colors of her emotions, colors that had never dimmed, not even in the darkest of times. Her art caught the eye of a gallery owner, and soon, her pieces were the centerpiece of a well-received exhibition. It was during one of these exhibitions that fate, with its ironic sense of timing, brought Alex back into her orbit. He stood there among the crowd, his eyes locked on her across the room, recognition dawning in his gaze. But to Jessica he was just another face among many, no emotional strings pulling at her heartstrings, no scars throbbing with old wounds. Alex approached, hesitation mixing with hope in his eyes. "Jessica, it's me, Alex. I can't believe this. You're amazing and I..." His voice trailed off as he searched her face for signs of the love they once shared. Jessica looked at him, her gaze polite but detached. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice void of any warmth that might suggest a shared history. The pain that flickered across Alex's face was palpable, but to Jessica it meant nothing. She turned back to her guests, her heart untouched, her memories clear of any heartache he might have once caused. In that moment, Alex realized the full weight of his choices. He had left her once, thinking he was moving towards a better future with Sarah. Now he was just a ghost from a past that Jessica no longer remembered, a past that no longer held any power over her. Jessica sat motionless in the living room, staring at the empty space where Alex had stood just moments ago. The weight of his absence pressed down on her chest like a crushing force. The letter, now crumpled in her shaking hands, was all that remained of the love she had once believed in. Her mind swirled with memories, his laughter, the way he used to hold her close, the whispered promises of forever. But forever had lasted only until Sarah re-entered his life. She needed air. She needed to escape the suffocating silence of the apartment that still carried his scent. Grabbing her car keys, she stormed out, the sound of her heels clicking against the pavement the only noise breaking the eerie quiet of the night. The sky was overcast, a mirror of her darkening thoughts, the weight of heartbreak making her breathing shallow. The streets stretched ahead of her, empty and lifeless, just like she felt inside. The radio played a soft melody, but she barely heard it over the storm in her mind. Alex's words echoed in her head, taunting her. "I never stopped loving Sarah. I thought I could, but I can't." Over and over the betrayal looped like a haunting refrain. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles turning white as her vision blurred with unshed tears. A honk blared from somewhere in the distance, snapping her out of her daze for just a moment, but it wasn't enough. She barely registered the red light ahead, too lost in the torment of her thoughts. Headlights came into view, too fast, too close. Then a deafening crash. Metal twisted and screeched as her car spun wildly before slamming into something solid. Pain exploded in every part of her body. Her head hit the window, and a blinding white light filled her vision before darkness swallowed her whole. Voices. Distant, muffled voices. Jessica's consciousness flickered in and out, the world around her reduced to flashes of bright lights and unfamiliar faces. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled her nostrils. She tried to move, but her body felt like it was weighed down by cement. A piercing pain shot through her skull as she attempted to open her eyes. "She's waking up," a voice said urgently. Her eyelids fluttered, and through the haze she made out two figures, her parents, their faces pale with worry. She blinked slowly, her throat dry and scratchy as she tried to speak. "Jessica, sweetheart," her mother whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're in the hospital. You were in an accident." Accident? The word sounded foreign. Her mind struggled to connect the dots, to remember what had happened before the darkness took her. A throbbing ache settled in her temples as she tried to push past the fog clouding her thoughts. She looked at her mother, then her father, their expressions pleading for some recognition. Her lips parted and the first thing she managed to ask was, "What happened?" "You don't remember?" her father asked cautiously. Jessica frowned. She tried to recall something, anything. But there was nothing but fragmented images that didn't make sense. The accident. She vaguely recalled the sound of screeching tires, the impact, the overwhelming pain. But before that, it was like staring into a void. She struggled, frustration growing. I remember driving. I remember. She winced, the effort making her head pound. But before that, it's all blank. Her mother hesitated before glancing at the doctor standing at the edge of the room. The man in the white coat stepped forward, his expression gentle but serious. Jessica, you suffered a head injury during the accident, he explained. You have retrograde amnesia. It's temporary, but some of your recent memories might be difficult to retrieve. Amnesia. The word sent a chill down her spine. How much did I forget? She whispered, gripping the sheets beneath her fingers. Her parents exchanged an uneasy glance before her mother reached out, taking Jessica's hand in hers. Sweetheart, she said cautiously, there are people you might not remember. Moments from the past couple of years that might be missing. Jessica's heart began to race. She searched her mind desperately, trying to find something. Anything that would explain this overwhelming emptiness. Her name. Her childhood. Her school years. They were all there clear as day. But something was off. There were gaps she couldn't fill. An unsettling feeling of absence where memories should have been. Who? She asked. Who did I forget? Her father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Jessica, you were engaged. Her breath hitched. Engaged? The word sounded foreign to her own ears. She turned to her mother in disbelief. That can't be right. I would remember if I was engaged. Tears welled in her mother's eyes. His name is Alex. The name landed like an unfamiliar melody in her ears. She blinked, waiting for recognition, for even the faintest flicker of memory to appear. But there was nothing. A blank slate where a person should have been. Jessica shook her head. I don't know who that is. Her mother let out a small, choked sob, and her father sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. The doctor spoke again, his voice level. This is normal, Jessica. The mind sometimes blocks out traumatic memories as a form of self-protection. Your accident was severe, and it's possible that your brain selectively erased emotionally significant events. Jessica swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the bedsheet tightly. So, I forgot my fiancé. The words felt alien on her tongue. Yes, her father confirmed. And he's been wanting to see you. A strange, cold feeling washed over her. Someone she had apparently loved. Someone who was supposed to be important. And yet, she couldn't remember a single thing about him. Does he know? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother hesitated. Yes. He was devastated when he heard. A knock on the door made Jessica jump. The room went still as the door slowly creaked open, revealing a tall figure standing hesitantly at the threshold. Jessica's gaze met his, searching for familiarity. But the moment she looked into his eyes, all she felt was nothing. Alex took a step forward, his face a mixture of relief and pain. Jessica, he murmured, his voice laced with emotion. She stared at him, waiting for recognition to dawn. But there was nothing. No warmth, no anger, no heartbreak. Just emptiness. Alex's eyes flickered with something unspoken, and he stepped closer, his hand reaching out as if to touch her. You don't remember me, do you? Jessica exhaled slowly, searching his face for anything that might trigger a memory. But there was only silence in her mind, a void where he was supposed to be. I'm sorry, she said, her voice steady but distant. I don't know who you are. The words cut through the room like a blade. Alex's expression twisted, his body stiffening as though he had been physically struck. Jessica watched him carefully, waiting for something to break through the fog in her mind. But there was nothing. No pain, no longing. Just a man standing before her, desperate for something she no longer had to give. Jessica spent the following days in the hospital in a haze of white walls, distant beeping machines, and the murmurs of doctors and nurses shuffling in and out of her room. The soft hum of conversations between her parents filled the air, their concern evident in every glance they exchanged. She could see the worry etched into their faces, but they smiled when she looked at them, as if trying to mask the weight of the situation. Her mother had been holding her hand since she woke up, her grip warm but firm, as though she feared letting go would mean losing her again. Her father stood near the window, staring outside with an unreadable expression, deep in thought. Jessica could tell they were avoiding something, choosing their words carefully, as if she were fragile porcelain that might crack under the wrong sentence. She noticed how they dodged questions about her past year, filling conversations with stories from her childhood or vague reassurances that she would remember in time. Felt strange. She knew who they were, remembered her life, her childhood, her education. Yet there were pieces missing, gaps that shouldn't have been there. The days blurred into one another, with nurses coming in to check her vitals, doctors asking her simple memory questions, and her mother fussing over whether she had eaten enough. Her father tried to make small talk, discussing work, news, anything that didn't hint at what she had forgotten. But the more they avoided the subject, the more it gnawed at her. It was during one of these quiet hospital mornings that her best friend, Lucy, came storming in, breaking the cautious routine that had settled in. Lucy, never one to filter her words, burst into the room with an energy that made Jessica momentarily forget she had just survived a life-threatening accident. "You scared the hell out of me," Lucy exclaimed, dropping a bouquet of sunflowers onto the bed. Lucy hesitated for a moment, chewing on her lip as if debating whether to say something. Then before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. "So, do you remember Alex?" The name hit Jessica like a cold wave, unfamiliar yet oddly significant. Her forehead creased as she tried to summon a face, a memory, anything. But there was nothing. The name carried weight, yet it was like grasping at smoke. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said, her voice laced with uncertainty. "Should I?" Lucy's eyes widened in shock, then quickly darted to Jessica's mother, who looked tense, her grip tightening on the chair she sat in. "Oh God," Lucy murmured under her breath. "You really don't remember?" Jessica's heart pounded a little harder. "Who is he?" she demanded, eyes flicking between Lucy and her parents. Her mother inhaled sharply, pressing her lips together. "Maybe this isn't the right time." "No," Jessica cut in firmly. "I want to know. You've all been treating me like I might break, but I can handle it. Just tell me who Alex is." Lucy let out a slow breath, looking both hesitant and apologetic. "Jess, Alex was your fiancé." The room fell silent. Jessica blinked, expecting some kind of reaction within herself. A rush of memories and overwhelming emotion. But there was nothing. A fiancé? The word felt foreign on her tongue. She turned to her parents, searching their faces for confirmation. Her father rubbed his temples, and her mother gave a small nod, eyes filled with unspoken sadness. "You were engaged," her mother said softly. "But the accident seems to have erased him from your memory." Jessica's mind raced, trying to comprehend the enormity of what she was hearing. A fiancé? She had been engaged? And yet she couldn't recall anything about him. Not his face, not his voice, not the way she had felt about him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. "We didn't want to overwhelm you," her father admitted. "The doctor said memory loss from trauma can be selective. We thought it might come back on its own." Jessica felt like she had been dropped into someone else's life. She searched her brain desperately, willing herself to remember, but it was as if her mind had locked away every trace of this so-called Alex. Lucy's voice softened. "I know this must be crazy for you, but Alex was important to you." Jessica stared at the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of unanswered questions. "Then why don't I feel anything? No heartbreak, no longing, no sadness. Just a hollow absence where someone significant was supposed to be." Before anyone could answer, there was a knock at the door. The room tensed as the door creaked open, revealing a man standing at the threshold. Tall, with disheveled hair and tired eyes, he looked at her with an unreadable expression. Jessica's heart pounded, not out of recognition, but because she could feel the tension in the room shift. The man swallowed, stepping forward hesitantly. "Jessica, it's me. It's Alex." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, searching his face, hoping for something, anything to trigger a memory. But all she saw was a stranger looking at her, like he had lost the most important thing in the world. She parted her lips, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know you." Alex flinched as though she had physically struck him. His jaw clenched, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. "No, you do," he said, almost desperately. "You just don't remember yet." Jessica shook her head. "I don't feel anything. I don't even recognize your face." Alex's eyes darkened, pain flashing across his features. We were engaged, Jessica. You loved me. The words rang hollow in her ears. Loved. Past tense. Whatever love had existed between them was now a ghost, erased from her mind. Alex took another step forward, as if closing the distance between them might bring her memories rushing back. But Jessica instinctively leaned away, the unfamiliarity of him sending a chill down her spine. You really don't remember me? He whispered, voice strained. She shook her head. I'm sorry. Alex exhaled shakily, rubbing a hand over his face. He cut himself off, then let out a bitter chuckle. This is karma, isn't it? Jessica frowned. Karma. His expression turned unreadable, a mix of guilt and regret. Never mind, he muttered. Lucy and her parents watched silently, unsure whether to intervene. Jessica sat up straighter, her gaze locked on the man claiming to be someone she had once loved. Tell me, Alex, she said slowly. If I really loved you, why did I forget you? Alex's face paled, his lips parting as though to respond, but no words came out. The silence that followed spoke louder than any answer he could have given. Jessica sat in the quiet of her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at her felt familiar, yet foreign. There were pieces missing, fragments of a past she could no longer grasp, memories of a love that had vanished from her mind. Alex had come and gone, his desperate eyes lingering in her thoughts, but they held no meaning to her. She felt nothing. No loss, no longing, just an empty space where something significant had once existed. And maybe that was a gift. She had a choice. She could sit in the emptiness, waiting for lost memories to return, or she could move forward, leaving behind a past she no longer needed. So she chose. Jessica threw herself into her work, spending long hours at the office, taking on projects that once intimidated her. Without the weight of a relationship dictating her time, she found herself excelling in ways she had never imagined. Deadlines no longer felt like burdens but challenges she welcomed. Boardroom meetings turned into opportunities to prove herself, and within months, she had secured a promotion that placed her in a leadership role, one that she had unknowingly been working toward for years. She no longer tiptoed around decisions, no longer sought permission to chase her ambitions. Before, there had been unseen shackles, a quiet restraint that had kept her tethered to the idea of being someone's partner first, an individual second. But now she had reclaimed herself, and she thrived. Outside of work, Jessica discovered that life held more than just professional success. She started trying things she had once dismissed, hobbies she never explored because her world had revolved around someone else's preferences. She signed up for a painting class, something she had always wanted to do but had never made time for. The first few strokes on the canvas were hesitant, but soon she found solace in the rhythm of the brush, the freedom of color. Each painting became an expression of herself, her emotions, her journey, her rebirth. She joined a hiking group, experiencing the thrill of reaching new heights, both literally and figuratively. The fresh air, the burn in her legs as she climbed, the breathtaking views at the top. It all reminded her of how vast the world was, how much she had yet to see. The confines of her past no longer held her back. Her social life flourished too. Lucy, her ever-loyal friend, made sure of that. They attended networking events, weekend brunches, and impromptu road trips. Jessica met new people, engaged in conversations that weren't overshadowed by the ghost of a relationship that no longer existed. She laughed more, lived fully, and for the first time in a long while she felt truly content. Her success did not go unnoticed. Industry leaders began to recognize her work. Invitations to exclusive business events started arriving. She was no longer just another name in her field. She was a force to be reckoned with. One evening she found herself in a grand hotel ballroom, attending a prestigious corporate gala. Dressed in an elegant black gown, she moved through the crowd with confidence, engaging in conversations that sparked new ideas and opened new doors. The event was a celebration of innovation, recognizing individuals who had made significant contributions in their industries. And then they called her name. Jessica blinked, momentarily stunned as applause filled the room. She had been so consumed by her work, by her personal growth, that she had not realized just how far she had come. As she walked onto the stage to accept the award, she felt a sense of pride she had never known before. This was hers. Not shared, not given, earned. As she stood before the audience, a thought crossed her mind. Had she still been engaged, still entangled in a love that had prioritized someone else's needs above her own, would she have been here? Would she have found this version of herself? She didn't need an answer. After the ceremony, she stepped outside for a moment of solitude, breathing in the cool night air. The city lights stretched before her, vibrant and full of promise. She felt at peace, until she heard a voice behind her. "I almost didn't recognize you." Jessica turned, her eyes landing on Alex. He looked different, tired, uncertain. There was no confidence in his stance, no certainty in his gaze. He was a man standing in the presence of something he had lost. She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I heard about everything. Your success, your name in the industry. You're everywhere." He chuckled, but it lacked humor. "You're not the same woman I left behind." Jessica tilted her head slightly, studying him. "No, I'm not." A flicker of something passed over his face. Regret, realization, something else she didn't care to decipher. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "Leaving you, choosing Sarah. I thought I knew what I wanted, but I was wrong. I lost you, and now—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I don't even know if there's a way to fix this." Jessica regarded him for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, just amused by the irony of it all. "Alex," she said, her voice steady, "there's nothing to fix." He blinked, caught off guard. "But I don't remember you." Her words were not bitter, not meant to wound, just a simple statement of fact. "Whatever we were, whatever I felt for you, it's gone. I'm not the woman you left, and I have no interest in being her again." His face fell, and for the first time she saw him for what he was. Not the man who had broken her, but a stranger who had no place in her life anymore. Jessica stepped forward, offering him a small, polite smile. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Alex. But it won't be with me." And with that she walked away. Not out of anger, not out of pain, but out of freedom. She had built something for herself, something strong, unshakable. And she would never let anyone take that away from her again. Jessica moved through the grand hall of the conference center with effortless confidence. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow over the elegantly dressed professionals mingling in conversation, discussing business ventures and industry innovations. It had been 2 years since she had rebuilt her life. And now she was not just another attendee at this high-profile event. She was a key speaker. The invitation had come months ago, a recognition of her growing influence in the corporate world. She had worked relentlessly, building a name for herself, carving a space where she was respected and admired. Gone was the woman who had once clung to a love that was never meant to last. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that the only validation she needed was her own. As she made her way toward the ballroom, a waiter passed by, offering her a glass of champagne. She accepted it with a polite nod, her lips curling into a small smile as she took in the grandeur of the evening. It was in moments like these that she realized just how far she had come. And then, as fate would have it, she heard a voice she hadn't thought about in years. "Jessica." She turned, brows slightly furrowed as she searched for the source of the familiar voice. A man stood a few feet away, staring at her as if he had seen a ghost. It took her a moment, but as her gaze settled on him, she felt nothing. The man before her looked vaguely familiar, but there was no rush of recognition, no jolt of emotion. He had deep-set eyes, slightly tired, as if the weight of the world had been pressing down on him for years. His posture wasn't as confident as she imagined it had once been. His stance hesitant, almost as if he wasn't sure he should have called out to her at all. "Jessica," he repeated, his voice softer this time, as though saying her name again would make her remember him. She tilted her head slightly, searching his face. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Alex's breath hitched. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, struggling to process what she had just said. He had imagined this moment so many times, what he would say, how he would explain everything, but this wasn't how it was supposed to go. "It's me," he said finally. "Alex." Jessica blinked, waiting for something to click into place, but nothing came. There was no flood of memories, no sense of familiarity, just an empty void where, apparently, he should have been. I don't remember you," she said simply, her tone neutral. The words hit Alex harder than he had anticipated. He had known about her amnesia, of course, had heard from mutual friends that she had no recollection of him after the accident. But standing here, seeing her, knowing that she had truly erased him from her life, it was like a gut punch he wasn't prepared for. "You really don't remember me?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Jessica shook her head, offering a polite but distant smile. "I'm sorry." Alex let out a shaky exhale, running a hand through his hair. He looked like he wanted to say something else, something desperate, but he hesitated. Jessica took another sip of her champagne, tilting her head slightly as she observed him. "Did we know each other well?" she asked, purely out of curiosity, as though she were discussing a distant acquaintance and not someone who had once played a significant role in her life. Alex swallowed hard. "We were engaged," he said finally. She raised a brow. "Oh, that was all. Just a simple acknowledgement. No shock, no distress. Just an indifference that made Alex's stomach twist uncomfortably." Jessica let the silence linger for a moment before glancing at the ballroom. "It was nice meeting you, Alex. I should get going." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." She sighed internally, but out of courtesy she turned back. "There's so much I need to say," Alex continued, his tone edged with something akin to desperation. Jessica stared at him, waiting. "I left you for Sarah," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "And not long after she left me. Said I wasn't the man she thought I was. I thought choosing her was the right thing, but I was wrong." He let out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head. "I lost my job. My life spiraled. And through it all I kept thinking about you. Wondering if maybe I had made the worst mistake of my life." Jessica listened, her expression unreadable. She felt detached, as if she were listening to a stranger recount a sad story, rather than a man who had once meant something to her. "I came here tonight hoping to see you," Alex admitted. "Hoping that maybe," he hesitated, looking at her as if searching for something in her eyes. "Maybe there was a chance to fix things." Jessica exhaled softly, giving him a small smile, one filled not with warmth, but with quiet finality. "Alex," she said gently, "I think you're misunderstanding something." His brows furrowed. She set her glass down on a nearby table and met his gaze directly. "I don't remember you. But even if I did, I don't think it would change anything." Alex's face fell. "Jessica, please." She held up a hand, stopping him. "You made your choice and I made mine. And the truth is, even without my memories of you, I've been happy." Alex inhaled sharply, his hands clenching at his sides. "So that's it? Just like that?" She nodded. "Yes, just like that." He looked as though he wanted to argue, to plead, but then he saw it, the certainty in her eyes. The unwavering confidence of a woman who had moved on, who had found something beyond the heartbreak he had once left her with. Jessica smiled again, though this time there was a hint of amusement behind it. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Alex. But it's not with me." And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she disappeared into the crowd. Alex stood frozen in place, watching her leave, the reality of the moment settling over him like a crushing weight. She was gone, not just in memory but in every way that mattered. And there was nothing he could do to change that. Jessica had long stopped trying to force memories back. Whatever had been lost in the accident, she had learned to accept. She had built a life she was proud of, one that no longer revolved around pieces of a past that refused to return. Yet, fate had a way of reintroducing things she thought she had left behind. One evening at a dinner party hosted by a close friend, she found herself surrounded by familiar faces, some from her past, some from her present. The wine flowed freely, and conversations drifted effortlessly from one topic to another. It was then, as she listened to laughter echo across the table, that a name she hadn't spoken in years surfaced in conversation. "You know, Alex has been asking about you," someone mentioned casually. Jessica paused, her fingers tightening slightly around the stem of her wine glass. She hadn't thought about him since their last encounter. She had closed that chapter the moment she walked away, but apparently, he had not done the same. "Really?" she asked, her tone light, unaffected. Her friend nodded. "Yeah, he's been trying to get in touch with you for a while now. Said he wanted to talk." Jessica exhaled slowly, swirling the wine in her glass. The mention of his name should have stirred something inside her. Anger, nostalgia, sadness. But there was nothing. Only a distant curiosity, as if they were discussing a stranger rather than someone she had once planned to spend her life with. She had spent so much time rebuilding herself, reshaping her world without him in it. Why did he think he still had a place in it now? A few days later, she received a message. A simple request. Can we meet? She stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether she should respond at all. Finally, she typed out a single word. Okay. They met at a quiet cafe, away from the noise of the city. When she arrived, Alex was already there, seated at a corner table, fidgeting with his cup. He looked up the moment she walked in, his eyes scanning her as if trying to read every change time had etched onto her. Jessica sat down across from him, offering a polite smile but nothing more. You look good, Alex said after a beat, his voice softer than she remembered. Thank you, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. There was an awkward pause before he finally spoke again. I saw you at the conference. I didn't get to tell you, but I'm proud of you. You've done incredible things. Jessica nodded. I have. Alex exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Listen, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I made a mistake, leaving you choosing Sarah. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Jessica tilted her head slightly, watching him carefully. And what exactly do you want from me now? He hesitated, then leaned forward, his expression earnest. I want to fix things. I want another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I can't stop thinking about you, about us. There was a time when those words might have shaken her, might have made her heart race with possibilities. But that time had passed. Jessica took a sip of her coffee before meeting his gaze. Alex, she said calmly, I don't think you understand. I don't remember you. And even if I did, I don't think it would change anything. He flinched, the weight of her words settling heavily between them. But what if we could start over? He pressed. Get to know each other again? She sighed, setting her cup down. You're asking me to build something with a man who, as far as I'm concerned, is a stranger to me. Alex swallowed hard. But we weren't strangers. We were. Jessica shook her head. We were something. Past tense. And I have no desire to go backward. Silence stretched between them, thick with the realization that there was no salvaging what had already been lost. I'm happy, Alex, she continued, her voice gentle but firm. I have a life that fulfills me, dreams I'm chasing, and someone who… She stopped herself, not out of hesitation, but because it wasn't necessary to spell it out. There was someone new in her life. Someone who fit into the present, rather than clinging to the past. Alex looked down, nodding slowly. I see. Jessica offered him a small smile, not out of pity, but out of the simple acknowledgement that they had once been something that no longer existed. You'll be okay, she told him. He met her gaze, searching for something, maybe hope, maybe closure. And if I never am? She sighed, standing up. Then that's not my problem to fix. With that, she turned and walked away, her steps steady, her heart light. Some things were meant to stay in the past, and she had no intention of looking back. Jessica sat on the balcony of her new apartment, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin as she looked out over the city skyline. The lights twinkled in the distance, each one a beacon of possibility, a reminder of how far she had come. It had been a long journey filled with pain, confusion, and unexpected twists. Yet, as she gazed at the vast expanse before her, she realized just how much she had gained, how much she had rebuilt. 2 years ago, she had been trapped in the chaos of her own mind, caught between the fragments of a past that no longer seemed relevant. Alex, Sarah, the heartbreak, all of it had once defined her, but now none of it held power over her. The accident, which had shattered her body and erased her memories, had also given her the chance to start fresh. It was a twisted gift, painful at first but ultimately liberating. The loss of her past had been jarring, but it had also freed her. In the absence of memory, she found herself. She rediscovered her passions, her strengths, her ability to succeed without depending on anyone else. For the first time in her life, Jessica didn't feel like she was defined by a relationship or by the expectations of those around her. She was simply herself. Her career, which had once been secondary to her personal life, flourished. She took risks, made decisions, and found success that she hadn't even imagined was possible. And beyond her professional accomplishments, Jessica found peace in the small things: quiet evenings alone, the satisfaction of a project well done, the joy of her own company. She had learned to embrace solitude, to appreciate the beauty in being alone with her thoughts, her aspirations. But the transformation wasn't just internal. As the days passed, her life began to fill with new relationships, friendships that were built on mutual respect and shared values, not the residue of old baggage. She traveled to places she had always dreamed of, seeing the world not through the lens of someone else's expectations, but through her own eyes. Each new destination was a reminder that the world was vast, full of opportunities and adventures that had nothing to do with the past. Jessica's life was no longer tethered to anyone else's choices. She had taken the reins and built something that was entirely hers. She was no longer the woman who had been abandoned and forgotten. She was the woman who had come back from the brink, stronger than before, with a future that was entirely in her hands. As she sipped her drink and reflected on how much she had changed, Jessica realized that the journey was far from over. She had plans, big ones. She had always wanted to explore the world more deeply, to immerse herself in different cultures, to understand the vastness of human experience. And now nothing was holding her back. In fact, she had already begun planning her next adventure. A trip around the world, to explore new horizons and discover the places that had only existed in her dreams. She had the resources now, the independence, and the confidence to make it happen. And this time she would do it for herself. She wasn't waiting for someone else to define her experiences. She was carving out her own path, following her passions and finding joy in every new step. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lucy, her best friend, reminding her about a new project that had caught her attention. A project that combined her business expertise with her newfound love for art and travel. Jessica smiled to herself. She had been considering something like this for a while. An initiative that would allow her to merge her professional world with her personal interests. The possibilities were endless, and Jessica couldn't wait to see where they would take her. There was no more looking back, no more wondering about the what-ifs of the past. Her future was bright, and she was determined to embrace every opportunity that came her way. For the first time in years, Jessica felt truly free from the past, free from the expectations of others, free to build the life she had always dreamed of. And as she looked out at the skyline one last time, she knew this was only the beginning. The world was hers to conquer, and she was more than ready to face it on her own terms.